Hello, everyone. Today we'll be revising the biological and cognitive explanations for schizophrenia. To be able to do so, we'd pick up this question from the March 2024 paper. Before we get started, let me remind you your CI paper 3 for A-level psychology is of 1 hour and 30 minutes. It is a 60-mark paper where you're expected to attempt questions from the components that you have studied. In our case, because we have studied clinical psychology, and the next option we're going to pick would be health psychology, we'd only should be sticking to these questions. So, taking this ahead, this paper is of 1 hour and 30 minutes. You have, it's a 60-mark paper. And for this paper, you're expected to answer questions from two options, the two that I said that you've studied, right? So there are 8 questions in total that you would be expected to attempt. 4 questions from the first 4 questions, that is question number 1, 2, 3, and 4, would be from clinical psychology. And from the units, rather say from the components you've studied, you do not have any choice at all. So today in this video, I would like to discuss question number 1 that we had in February, March 2024. Without any further ado, let's begin. If we have a look at this question is a 4-mark question, as a typical 4-mark question is. The question over here reads, Prisha is hearing voices that seem real to her, but no one else in her family can hear them. So if you've covered up your syllabus, by only reading this, you'd understand what this is referring to. This is referring to hallucinations. This is referring to, rather say, auditory hallucinations here, right? So Prisha is hearing voices that seem real to her, but no one else in her family can hear them. Auditory hallucinations. This is hinting on that part. So when I have auditory hallucinations in my mind, the next thing that occurs to me is, so while I read this, I know this is referring to auditory hallucinations, and at the same time, I should know that I should be able to identify that this is from the unit schizophrenia, the first unit that we study under clinical psychology. She tells the doctor, we talk about Prisha, okay? She tells the doctor about the voices and that her identical twin sister. So now I know this is referring to the biological explanation, right? So she tells the doctor about the voices and that her identical twin sister was diagnosed with schizophrenia 3 years ago. Prisha's doctor diagnoses her with schizophrenia. Now, as I read the word identical twin over here, I should I should be able to identify that we're talking about MZs, that is monozygotic twins. And remember, MZs are monozygotic twins, DZs are dizygotic twins, which are also referred to as fraternal twins, right? So DZs are non-identical twins, MZs are identical twins. Remember this. And if I talk about a comparison over here in terms of concordance, now what is concordance over here? The extent to which if one individual has a particular disorder in this particular context, right? So the extent to which there is similarity between different twins, we refer to that as concordance, right? So in this context, if one of the individual has a particular abnormality, the likelihood of the other one having it too. So the concordance rate for MZs, that is monozygotic twins, that is identical twins, is higher as compared to DZs, that is non-identical twins, or also referred to as fraternal twins. So this is the part that we're interested in, right? MZs having a higher concordance rate, or in other words, if Prisha's identical twin has been diagnosed with schizophrenia, there's a likelihood, or the extent to which Prisha might be vulnerable towards having this particular mental illness too. So, getting back to the question again, the question reads, Prisha is hearing voices that seem real to her, but no one else in her family can hear them. She tells the doctor about the voices and that her identical twin sister was diagnosed with schizophrenia 3 years ago. Prisha's doctor diagnoses her with schizophrenia. Outline two explanations. Now, this is where the question starts, right? Outline two explanations for Prisha's diagnosis based on what she told her doctor. Now, based on what she has told her doctor, you'll have to read this part again. You see how I'm reading these questions over and over again, because remember, this is a 4-mark question. For a 4-mark question, you get 6 minutes. It's a simple calculation. For every mark you have, you multiply it with 1.5. With that calculation in mind, I have 6 minutes. So we have 6 minutes in total, right? So if you have 6 minutes to write an answer, there's no harm spending a minute understanding what the question requires from us. This is a major thing that I keep on asking kids not to do. I've seen students rushing through the paper. See, if you know your content well, you have enough of time. Know that. But of course, for that, you need to practice your paper. I mean, you pick up a paper and attempt the entire paper in one go to see if you're able to cover up everything that is required in the given time we have. So for now, if you've just done clinical psychology, you should know that for paper three, you would be expected to do question number 1, 2, 3, and 4. And in your CIs, you would have some 45 minutes to be able to do so. So you just pick up a paper. If you know your content, start off with question number 1, 2, 3, and 4 and see how long it's taking you. Now, if it's taking more than 45 minutes, know that more of practice is required. But do not try compromising on reading and understanding the question, because guess what? Even if you've missed on a tiny little part from the question or the information that has been provided to you, the likelihood of you messing up with those 4 marks is all, for the matter of fact, the other questions is always there. So be a little careful, spend a minute. It is totally worth it to be able to read this question, right? So I'm a teacher. I've been reading this question over and over again so that you know all of this is pretty important. So outlined 2 explanations for Prisha's diagnosis based on what she told the doctor. Let's read what she has told the doctor again. She tells the doctor about the voices and that her identical twin sister was diagnosed with schizophrenia 3 years ago. Prisha's doctor diagnoses her with schizophrenia. So, the situation that we are in, Prisha has an identical sister who has been diagnosed with schizophrenia 3 years ago. Prisha hears voices. These voices seem real to her, but no one else in her family hears those voices. Prisha goes, visits a doctor, tells her the history, tells her about her sister, and the doctor diagnoses Prisha with schizophrenia as well. Remember, we talked about Prisha and her MZ twin, that is monozygotic twin, that is identical twin, who has been diagnosed with schizophrenia about 3 years ago. Having a look at the question again over here reads, outline 2 explanations for Prisha's diagnosis. Now, we've been expected to outline 2 explanations for schizophrenia, right? So it's easy calculation, split it into 2 marks each for 2 marks each for explanation. Having a look at the guidance, and you'd understand this better, of course. Percentage is not required for full marks. I'll tell you why the examiner is referring to percentage over here. One. Number two, if no percentage, then need to mention that concordance is higher because between identical compared to non-identical twins. This is something that we've just discussed. You can also allow biochemical link to hearing voices as well. Now that's on your discretion totally. So having a look at the marking scheme over here, the generic marking scheme over here reads, award 2 marks for a detailed explanation for schizophrenia linked to Prisha. It better be linked to Prisha, because if it's not linked to Prisha, then you are not getting the second mark. Let's keep it very simple. So we'd hop on to the example, but the purpose behind this video is to help you revise with the biological explanations for schizophrenia. So as we speak about the biological explanations for schizophrenia, and while doing so, we hit on the genetic component over here, the genetic part over here. If we have a look at the syllabus, our book, our Cambridge endorsed book, our course book, you'd see that being split into family studies, twin studies, and adoption studies. Moving on, if you talk about family studies here, because you see the name Gottesman and Shields over here, right? You see the name Gottesman and Shield over here, but if you have a look at your book would just have Gottesman mentioned there. I'll tell you where to bring in Shields from. Do not worry about that at all. So Gottesman in 1991 claimed that the likelihood of developing schizophrenia went from 1% in the general population up to 48% if you have an identical twin with schizophrenia. And this in itself is pretty supportive of the idea, right? So if you are a member of the general population, you have 1% chances of being diagnosed with schizophrenia. However, if you have an identical twin, remember we're talking about identical twins over here, because Prisha had an identical, or rather say has an identical twin who already has been diagnosed with schizophrenia some 3 years ago, right? So Gottesman, let's learn this. Okay, let's learn this. It doesn't take long. So Gottesman in the year 1991 claimed that the likelihood of developing schizophrenia went from 1% in the general population up to 48% if you have an identical twin with schizophrenia, being diagnosed with schizophrenia. And this is a huge difference. From on one end this is 1%, and on the other end this is 48%. Now, does this piece of information suffice or serve the purpose? Oh yes, it does, right? However, I mean, there are more researches too, there are more references too. I'll just zoom it out so that if you, when you guys could pause this and read through this, this would always be helpful. Now, moving on, if we talk about the specific research that the marking scheme has been referring to over here, that is the genetic explanation by Gottesman and Shields. This is, even when after the syllabus changed in 2024, even when after the syllabus changed in 2024, you do not really see Gottesman and Shields study in the course book that has been recently published and endorsed and published by the Cambridge. It's not a problem. I'll just show you where to pick up this research from. So the research that we have does serve the purpose. Now, there's this another study by Gottesman and Shields that was done in 1972. I'm trying to explain this study to you as well. So moving on, Gottesman and Shields in 1972, the researchers in this study drew their sample from 467 twins who were registered at the Maudsley Hospital in London between 1948 and 1964. So during this time period, there were 467 twins that were registered at the Maudsley Hospital in London. Out of these 467 twins, 57 pair of twins were identified. They conducted a series of tests on 24 sets of monozygotic twins, that is identical twins, and 33 of dizygotic twins. Twins were identified as MZs or DZs using blood group and fingerprint analysis. Now, what value does this line add to the information that we have received or the information that we've read? This shows us the credibility. I mean, we're talking about, we declaring, or we're taking these twins as monozygotic and dizygotic twins because they have been identified through proper validated procedures and measures. Now, so we had 57 pairs in total, out of which 24 were identified as identical twins and 33 were identified as non-identical twins. Moving on, the researchers interviewed both the patients and their twins, some of whom also had a diagnosis of schizophrenia. Here you go. This is what we were talking about. Participants also undertook cognitive tests such as object sorting in order to ensure the validity of diagnosis. Case summaries of each participants were independently evaluated by judges external to research. You know what? As a student, what I've seen is they just read this thing real quick. I mean, maybe spend some 5-10 seconds, and then remember, if you're doing that, you would be able to remember things only at surface level, right? So remember, every line that's written there holds a value. I mean, it's not difficult knowing more. Just ensure that you have a notebook with you when you're studying. Just put up the heading Gottesman and Shields, 1972. In the bracket, write down the biological explanation for the development of schizophrenia. Put a hyphen there. Add on genetic explanation. Add on twin studies. I mean, whatever the piece of information is, and then maybe vertically in the form of bullets, you just keep on putting this information. Trust me, if you write it while you are preparing, it would help you recall things better. It would ensure that you're not missing on anything that you shouldn't be missing on, right? So the researchers interviewed both the patients and their twins, some of whom also had a diagnosis of schizophrenia. Participants also undertook cognitive tests such as object sorting. In order to improve the validity, and there's ensure it in there, I've deliberately changed ensure to improve because I believe there are many other components that are required for validity as well. So that being said, in order to improve the validity of diagnosis, case studies of each participants were independently evaluated by judges, which have been that were external to the research. So that being said, if I sum it up, we're talking about some 57 pair of twins, out of which 24 were monozygotic twins, 33 were dizygotic twins. They were identified by using blood tests, by fingerprint analysis. I mean, that shows us how this identification was valid. Then the researchers interviewed these patients and their twins. When you interviewing someone, that is an example of a self-report measure. Self-report measure has its own do's and don'ts, pros and cons, advantages and disadvantages, strengths and weaknesses. So all of this eventually has to be put to use. The research methodology that you studied in AS is, I mean, turns out to be pretty handy. It would help you evaluate anything in a very good manner. So the researchers interviewed both the patients and their twins, some of whom also had a diagnosis of schizophrenia. Participants also undertook cognitive tests such as object sorting. In order to improve the validity of the diagnosis, they were independently, the case summaries, they were independently judged by people, by researchers who were external to the research. Now, all of this is being done to add on to the credibility, to be able to add on to the value of this research. So, moving on, Gottesman and Shields found that approximately 50% of the monozygotic twins had a shared schizophrenia status, but that concordance was much lower in disease. Remember, this is something that I mentioned even before we hopped onto this particular topic. Remember when we were reading the information that was provided to us by the by the by the by the by the question. While doing so, while discussing that, I had mentioned right at the top that the concordance rate for monozygotic twins is always high as compared to dizygotic twins, and this has been shown by Gottesman and Shield in the research that they conducted in 1972. Look at the difference. On one end, Gottesman and Shield found that approximately 50% of monozygotic twins had a shared schizophrenia status, but the concordance rate was much lower in dizygotic twins. In MZ twins, the co-twin was more likely to be schizophrenic if the illness of the twin was severe. Now, these are the factors that were significant there, or that were considered to be important. I mean, you guys can keep this in mind. Your textbook does not have this study, so it's on your discretion. You want to know more, you have this in front of you. You don't want to learn it, it is okay. Just listen to what I'm saying, and it's, I think, going to be enough. So, for example, if one twin had been hospitalized within the last 6 months of or had a catatonic symptom, this was classified as severe. So, what this says is the monozygotic twin, the co-twin, was more likely to be schizophrenic if the illness of the twin was severe. If the illness of the twin was severe, okay. Now, for this case, if the illness of the twin was severe, right? Now, what is severity over here? For example, if one twin had been hospitalized within the last 6 months or had catatonic symptoms, this was classified as severe. There was then a high likelihood that the co-twin also showed some schizophrenic symptoms, whereas in mild cases, co-twin concordance rate was far low. So, what do we learn from this? If we talk about what we're learning from this, what we learn from this entire thing is that monozygotic twins have, or identical twins, like Prisha had an identical sister, the likelihood of one the likely if one of the twin has a particular mental illness, the likelihood that the other one would have it too increases. So that being said, I we just revised the biological explanation, the biological, or rather the genetic explanation. In fact, we just revised the study that was conducted by Gottesman and Shield. Now, there's this another study that we are to put to use over here, that could be that is the cognitive study, right? So if we talk about how you score a 2 on 2 over here, because remember we had divided this 4-mark question into 2 parts. So Prisha may have been diagnosed with schizophrenia. Remember, link it to Prisha. If you're not linking it to Prisha, you are unnecessarily losing on a mark, which you wouldn't want. I wouldn't want you to lose on either. So Prisha may have been diagnosed with schizophrenia because it is genetic, and Prisha's twin sister was diagnosed 3 years ago. Gottesman and Shield found that there was a concordance rate of approximately 50% between identical twins, or researchers found that there was a higher concordance rate for identical twins compared to non-identical twins. Now, this is how you get the first mark, and this is how you get the second mark. Now, this part that you do not see highlighted is from the study that was conducted by Gottesman and Shield in 1972, which, like I said, I understand it's not mentioned in your course book, but doesn't really matter. We've just covered it up so you know where exactly the paper setter has picked it up from. So if you simply want to stick to your course book, that works fine too. So you get the first mark from this part, you get the second mark from this part. So the yellow highlighted part over here says research has found that there was a higher concordance rate for identical twins compared to non-identical twins. Now, initially at the beginning of the video, what I'd said was today we'd be discussing the genetic explanation and the cognitive explanation, but I have a feeling I've taken a bit too long discussing this genetic explanation, or the study by Gottesman and Scheele in 1972 in particular. So let's just keep another video. I try to explain you or help you revise the cognitive explanation in the next video, so you guys could break it up. That I believe would make it a little simpler for you. Thank you, and I hope this has been helpful.